Okay, welcome to Laboratory Assignment 3. For this lab, we're going to be doing a one sample T in SPSS. We're going to do one together, and then you'll do the next two on your own, and you'll submit all this information to Canvas when you're finished. So make sure you hang on to your outputs. Don't close out of the output. Make sure you're saving as you go along. Okay, so the first thing that we are going to do is read through the research design. And for SPSS application number 1, it says, an educational researcher theorizes that a new training technique may be used to increase reading comprehension among dyslexics. The researcher selects a sample of 10 children that the school psychologist has identified as dyslexic, but the researcher wants to be sure that they represent the population of known dyslexic as shown on the nationally standardized test. The standardized tests manual indicates that the population mean for diagnosed dyslexics is 80. Before the researcher proceeds with the study, the researcher gives the test to the sample and their scores are below. Determine whether this sample might be representative of the population. So there are the scores, and the first thing it says to do is state the null hypothesis below. So as we've talked about before, you know that the null hypothesis is the hypothesis of no difference. And so for this one, we're just going to be writing the sample of scores on a standardized test. Standardized test for dyslexia is not significantly different than population scores on a standardized, I cannot write standardized test for dyslexia. Okay, so the sample of scores on a standardized test for dyslexia is not significantly different than the population scores on a standardized test for dyslexia. So, if I was going to state the research hypothesis or the alternate hypothesis, the HA, then I would just say that the sample of scores on a standardized test for dyslexia is significantly different than the population scores on a standardized test for dyslexia. So for number 2, we are going to state which statistical analysis we're going to perform. What we are going to do is a one sample T, and because I have one group, I also have interval data, and I'm testing the hypothesis of difference. Is there a difference between my sample and the population? So one sample T for number 2. Sample T. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and perform the one sample T test on this data. And so the first thing that I'm going to need to do is go to my data editor on SPSS. And then I'm going to click on the variable view tab. And I'm going to go up here to where I can name my variable. And I am just going to write in this cell here, dyslexia scores. And then I think I'm going to label it DS for dyslexia scores. And since all the data are whole numbers, I'm going to just change the number of digits after the decimal to 0. And then I'm going to come back over to my data view, pull this out a little bit. And then I'm going to go ahead and enter in these 10 scores right here. Okay, and then once I have those values entered in, I am going to go to Analyze, Compare Means, One Sample T-Test. Click on that. So Analyze, Compare Means, One Sample T-Test. And then I'm going to take the variable I just made and pull it over to the test variable box. And then I am going to put the population mu in the test value box. So it said that the population mean was 80. So I'm going to put that there. Okay, and then I'm going to click OK. So then your output is going to pop up and it should look like this. First, we're going to go ahead and label it before we start breaking down what all this stuff means. This is going to be SPSS application 1, and this is lab. So the next step is to report the statistic in APA format. So you might be asking yourself, what is APA format? An APA format is the style of writing that we use in psychology when we write up our final reports on our studies and publish them to scholarly journal publications. So you can find all of the rules for writing an APA format in the publication manual of the American Psychological Association, and it is available for purchase on Amazon or wherever you buy your books. So when we write up our final science reports on the studies we do in the social sciences, from there we send them off to journals, scholarly journals, and here on your screen is an example of just a few scholarly journals, but there are tons, and they are peer-reviewed, which means that when you write your final science report paper and send it to one of these publishers of these scholarly journals, so Psychological Science, you send your paper to them, or you send your paper to American Psychologist, then what those publishers do is they send your paper with your name, whited out so that there's no bias. They send that paper off to 3 experts in the field that you're writing your research on, and then those experts review it and make sure that all of your stats are correct and that your methods were correct and that everything meets the ethical guidelines for the APA. And then if they all sign off on it, your paper gets published to one of these scholarly journals. So within these scholarly journals are a bunch of different articles or research reports written by social scientists. So remember, these articles are peer-reviewed and they've been chosen for publication, and so they are within those journals and they look like this. So while there are those physical journals, of course we have electronic databases as well. And as a student, you have access to all these databases if you ever just want to kind of peruse them and check out the latest research in the social sciences, but some of them are PsycInfo, APA PsycNet, EBSCOhost. There's a bunch of different databases where you can find all of these articles written up and peer-reviewed about scientific research in the field of the social sciences. So within these articles, you're going to find the different sections that make up an APA manuscript or paper. And so you're going to have your title page and then your abstract, your intro, your methods, your results, your discussion, your references, tables, figures, appendices. And so you are going to need to report your results, obviously, in the results section. And so when you do that, you're going to have to write them in APA format. And so that's where we get back to what we're doing on our lab worksheet, is reporting our finding in APA format. And so you can see on your slide that in the results section, there's 2 main types that you report, which are your descriptive stats and your inferential stats. So that's what we're going to be doing on our worksheet. For number 3, so it said to report the statistic in APA format. Here's an example of reporting a statistic in APA format. This one is referring to a data set about broccoli, so not the one we're using in our lab worksheet. But anyways, it reads, persons who eat broccoli regularly receive statistically significantly higher scores, and then you put the mean, standard deviation, then the general population, and then you write the test statistic that you're going to do, which is a T, and then you put the degrees of freedom in that first parentheses, equals, and then the actual test statistic value itself, and then P equals and your significance level. So here it is as a template, and so you could use this going forward to report your results. So here is the broccoli example plugged into the template. So you could see it says persons who eat broccoli regularly. That's highlighted in yellow, and it goes with that yellow arrow there that says that is a description of the sample. So in other words, where it asks to describe the sample, that's where we would plug in persons who eat broccoli regularly. And then report the results, and you can see that's in green. It goes with statistically significantly higher IQ scores, And then the blue is describe the population, and so here it's just written as the general population. So that's how you would fill in that portion. And now I'm going to show you how to use our one sample t-test results from our lab assignment worksheet here to show you how to complete this template. And in this example, we will include the values that we got on our output. So I've plugged in the little template onto the worksheet, and I'm just going to fill it in. So I'm going to start by replacing describe the sample with a description of the sample. So actually, I would say the sample of scores for the standardized test for dyslexia. So I'm just going to copy and paste that. We're going to report the results. So I am going to look at the given mean of 80 and the mean of our sample of these 10 students. And our mean is just slightly higher, not much at all. So the sample, so I'm going to remove these brackets. We remove brackets, we keep parentheses. So the sample of scores on a standardized test for dyslexia. I'm going to say the sample of scores on the standardized test for dyslexia were not significantly different. And then I'm going to plug in the mean. And so I'm going to come over here for the mean, and I see it is right here, 80.70. So I'm going to plug that in. Remember, we remove brackets from the template. So 80.70 is my mean. And then my standard deviation I'm going to get from my output, and it is 8.247, so I'm going to round that to 8.25. So 8.25. Remember, remove brackets, keep parentheses for correct APA formatting. We need that mean and standard deviation in those parentheses. Okay, so far we have the sample of scores on a standardized test for dyslexia were not significantly different. Mean 80.7, standard deviation equals 8.25. And we're just going to say the population scores on a standardized test for dyslexia, so we'll just copy and paste that for our description of the population. Remove that bracket. And then I'm ready to start entering in my inferential statistics. So where it says statistical test symbol, I'm going to change that to a T for t-test, in this case a one sample t-test. I'm going to remove everything including the brackets. And then I'm going to enter in this parentheses my degrees of freedom. And so my degrees of freedom are 9. So I'm going to enter 9 in there. And then my test value is this number under the T here, which looks like it is 2.68. So I'm going to, 0.268. So I'm going to round that to 0.27. So I put that in the test value space. I'm going to remove those brackets too. So the T value is 0.27. And then there's going to be a comma and then a P for our probability. And then we put our probability value, which in this case is 0.794. So we're going to call that 0.79. So sadly, we do not have a significant result here. So we would have to accept HO. For number 5, the question is there a significant difference between the sample and the population? And I am going to say no, because I had to accept HO. So if I rejected HO, I would say yes. And if I said yes, then I would, put a check mark on number 4 next to reject HO. So your options on this line here are either P less than 0.05. So that's going to be any significance value less than 0.05, or you can think of it as less than 5 cents, or any significance level that's P less than 0.01. So P less than 0.01 is the better of the two when we're reporting. So we always definitely want to report P less than 0.01 if we get a p-value that's less than 0.01 or less than 1 cent. But if we get between, under 5 cents or less than 0.05 and anything above 0.01, then we have to report p less than 0.05. Okay, and that is application 1 for this worksheet. So you're going to go ahead and do the rest of lab assignment 3 on your own. This is the same process as we did. Don't be fooled by the setup. I just want you to see data in different formats, but it's still the same exact thing. These are just a list of the clients. You could pretend their names, Alan, Bob, but this doesn't go in SPSS, just these values like we did on application number 1. And then you're going to go ahead and complete SPSS application number 3 on your own as well. And that's it for Lab 3. Thanks for listening till the end. Have a great day.